So GT will be on tonight at 10 o'clock with Sam Bailey. I've got Stuart Williams in the studio with me, local historian. His latest book, Walsall Borough, Past and Present, is out now. Stuart, how are you?
Oh, great to see you, mate.
So I'm surprised. It's quite a thin book, actually. It's only got the 86 pages. I thought Walsall would have had a bit more to shout about.
Ah, well, if I had a few years to write it, we might get there.
What's the origins of Walsall, then?
The origins of Walsall as a town is shrouded in mystery because most of the little places...
The best stories.
Absolutely, yeah, probably murder mystery. Most of the area dates back to at least the Anglo-Saxon period, but for some mysterious reason that nobody knows, Walsall was left out of the Domesday Book of 1086.
But Walsall did exist, did it then at that time?
We don't know. The evidence is not there, so the jury is out on that one.
You can't prove a negative, I
Probably
suppose.
there was something there, but what it was is anybody's guess.
So when we say Walsall, I suppose the area that's covered now by the town centre wasn't in the Domesday Book, but some of the towns that now make up the borough of Walsall were.
Yeah, most of them, and in fact, most of the little villages were there as well. There would have been very, very small settlements at that time, a few houses or maybe a farmstead or something like that.
I mentioned a few weeks ago I had a fantastic pub crawl in Bloxwich, and Bloxwich still very much has the air, although clearly it's part of Walsall Borough, and I suspect most people now wouldn't quibble with that, but the air of a separate place, a town unto itself.
Well, that's historically correct because, going back to medieval times and particularly the 18th century, a lot of arguing between Walsall and Bloxwich. Walsall today, as a metropolitan borough, is a bit like a mini version of Birmingham. So it's cobbled together with various different towns and villages over the centuries. But Bloxwich is very much a place unto itself. And even as late as 1928, they were calling for home rule for Bloxwich and likening the bantering to the Irish question.
And Bloxwich, it should be said, unlike Walsall, was named in the Domesday Book.
Absolutely.
Where are your favourite places in Walsall, Stu?
There are lots of interesting places in Walsall. It depends on what you're looking for, different types of society or architecture. Obviously, Walsall still has a few quite spectacular buildings. My favourite building in Walsall town centre is the old Science and Art Institute in Bradford Place, which is now offices. That was the origins of adult education in the town. Places like Streatley are semi-rural, but they're sort of more associated perhaps with Sutton Coldfield than Walsall, even though that they are largely in the borough. I'm a big fan of Bloxwich because my ancestors on my mother's side go back there to at least 1738. But there's something of interest in all the different towns and villages in the borough, and they are very different in some cases.
Yeah, another town I'm very fond of, again, I have to confess with a slightly alcoholic flavour to it, is Darlaston. Although Darlaston, I didn't really know Darlaston sort of in its pomp, but it was an incredible manufacturing centre, Darlaston. Of all the towns around here, Darlaston would have been right at the forefront in terms of manufacturing, wouldn't it?
Very much so in the days of heavy industry. Obviously, most of that's gone there now. But Darlaston was world famous for nuts, bolts and screws, and early on, gun locks.
Where else in Walsall would we be advised to check out the history of, Stuart?
Okay, it depends on what you're looking for.
Go on.
If you want a place that's relatively recent, there's Darlaston, which is only Brown Hills, which is only 200 or 300 years old as we know it today. Origins with Ogley Hay, but it's very much part of the common there, which is more like a forest. You often see deer wandering around parts of Brown Hills.
Brown Hills has got that great big sort of roundabout with a sort of miners. Would you call it a statue or a miner's mural anyway as you drive down the A34?
Yeah, it's a massive statue,
isn't it? Yeah?
It's that sort of Brown Hills' answer to the Statue of Liberty.
The statue of mining.
This is it. Well, it sort of overlooks the old Urban District Council House. The urban district of Brown Hills and Aldridge Brown Hills, they were added around about 1974 when West Midlands was formed and Walsall became a Walsall Metropolitan Borough. That was a bit controversial because lots of people in different parts of the borough today have this feeling that they've been taken over, almost mugged by Walsall. But of course that was all to do with wider changes in local government.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the sort of industrial past, places like Darlaston, and then there are other parts of Walsall, particularly in the northern part of the borough, and you mentioned Streatley, semi-rural, going out into quite wild Staffordshire countryside.
You are, yeah, and the street is an interesting place, although it might not seem that there's a vast amount there. It's one of those areas that sort of leaks into Staffordshire on one side and into Birmingham and Sutton Coldfield on the other side, and also into Walsall. And Aldridge is a bit like that because it's sort of more Lichfield facing in that sense.
Yeah, a little bit posh, you mean?
Yes. Although a lot of people see it as a dormitory town for Birmingham. When people wanted to get out of the dark satanic mills of Birmingham, some of them went to Aldridge in that area.
Yeah. This, you might regard this as an impertinent question, because I know historically, the 4 boroughs that make up the Black Country, Walsall would be one. In your view, is Walsall in the Black Country? Because not everybody regards Walsall as a proper Black Country town.
It depends on how you look at it. I would say that parts of the metropolitan borough are definitely Black Country in character. Black Country pedants might argue one way or the other, depending on your definition of Black Country. But I think historically you could certainly say Darlaston, Willenhall, and to some extent Bloxwich. Bloxwich is an odd sort of a place because on the side of the high street that faces the Black Country, it was very much industrial. Even little coal mines right up until the early 1900s. Whereas on the other side of the high street, it's more rural in the direction of Pelsall, which Pelsall is an interesting place in itself. It sort of frames itself as a little country village, but really it's an old mining and an iron making village. Right from the 19th century and early 20th century.
And you mentioned the nuts and bolts of Darlaston. Willenhall was always the lock town, wasn't it? Why did locks and lock making sort of default to Willenhall?
Well, it's something that originated not just in Willenhall, but it sort of came together over time, really.
It did become known for that, though, didn't it?
World famous. People like Squires and Yale, companies like that, Chubb. Of course, at one time, Willenhall sort of associated more with Wolverhampton, but again, during the sort of reorganisation in the early 70s, it became part of the Walsall Metropolitan Borough. But all of these places, really, you go to Willenhall, you go to Bloxwich, wherever, even to some parts of Walsall, they won't tell you they're in Walsall if you ask them where they're from. They say, I'm from Willenhall, I'm from Bloxwich, I'm from Chuckery, even.
Yeah, it's a local town identification rather than a borough. And does Walsall suffer as a result of that? Is there a lack of sense of identity, a sense of belonging in Walsall?
I think there might be. I mean, it's difficult to say, really. I think perhaps like a lot of places, people don't come together in the centre so much as they used to.
Yeah.
In the Victorian era, there was more of this civic pride sort of thing going on. And I think maybe people would sort of be more cheerleaders for that. But mind you, back then, they'd still be fighting between Walsall and Bloxwich, so who knows?
Well, it's a lovely book, Walsall Borough, Past and Present, a local history of towns and villages in Walsall Metropolitan Borough by Stuart Williams, published by Walsall Local History Centre. Got some great old photographs as well, which I know people love looking through. Where can people get hold of it, Stuart?
You can get it at Walsall Local History Centre. Call 01922 721305. Also in Waterstone's bookstore in Park Street Walsall, and from Walsall Museum and Walsall Leather Museum.
It's a lovely, lovely little book. Walsall Borough, Past and Present by Stuart Williams. Stuart, thank you for coming in and sharing it with us. Thank you.
A great pleasure.
Time now on BBC WM, approaching 11:30. Let's get the ladies' travel.